The vast halls of the Galactic Union shimmered with artificial light as ships from a dozen worlds hovered outside in orderly patterns. The conference was hosted on Earth this year, a symbol of humanity's rapid rise from a primitive species to a significant force in the galaxy, and yet many still saw them as too young, too emotional, too unpredictable. Among those critics stood Velra, a high-ranking diplomat from the dominant alien race known for their sharp intellect and colder than ice diplomacy. She arrived on Earth not as a guest, but as a judge, her posture perfect, her tone sharp, her gaze like frozen steel. Velra stepped into the main assembly chamber with calculated grace, her silver uniform flawless and her chin lifted slightly higher than necessary. The humans stood to welcome her, their leaders dressed in formal dark suits, their expressions polite but guarded. Ryan, the chief Earth envoy, stood at the center, his manner calm, his face unreadable. Velra offered a faint nod, but her lips curled with faint disdain. Her first speech echoed through the marble hall, her words coded in formal diplomacy, but lined with subtle insults. She questioned Earth's readiness to take part in high-level decisions. She suggested their emotions made them unreliable allies, and she floated the idea of placing oversight restrictions on human military activities she never raised. Her voice, yet each word was a blade, and the alien envoys beside her exchanged quiet glances, pleased by her dominance. Ryan remained still during the entire address, his hands folded behind his back, his eyes locked on Velra, not with anger, but with a kind of stillness that unsettled even some humans in the room. When his turn came, he responded with grace, thanking Velra for her honest views and reaffirming humanity's dedication to peace. His voice remained smooth, his words carefully chosen. He did not attack her verbally nor defend too eagerly. He let her insults hang in the air like smoke, giving no reaction she could twist into offense. Later that evening, a diplomatic dinner was arranged. The atmosphere looked warm, but the tension hummed underneath the surface. Velra took the center seat and spent most of the evening entertaining the other alien representatives with clever jokes about humans, their culture, and their clumsy attempts at diplomacy. She laughed with measured elegance, sipping a golden liquid that was Earth wine, and each time her gaze met Ryan's it carried a faint glimmer of superiority. Ryan watched quietly. He responded when needed. He smiled when spoken to. But beneath the surface, his mind was working fast. He knew what Velra truly feared: not war, not defeat, but humiliation, a loss of image before the galaxy. Her species cared about pride more than power, and Ryan had no plans to let the insult from earlier go unanswered, not directly, not emotionally, but with a kind of revenge only a human could craft patiently and precisely. The rest of the night passed with cheerful toasts and artificial smiles, but something had already shifted. Velra thought she had won, thought she had put the humans in their place, but she had mistaken Ryan's silence for weakness, not strategy. And as the guests left, and stars blinked softly outside the transparent ceiling above, Ryan stood alone near the exit, his eyes on Velra. As she walked past, her back straight, her pride untouched, or so she believed. What she did not know was that the seeds of her undoing had already been planted in that hall, in that dinner, in her laughter and arrogance, and in the quiet, unwavering gaze of the human envoy, who had learned long ago that the most effective revenge is not loud, not angry, not violent, but cold, careful, and unforgettable. Ryan did not rush. He understood the nature of power, not just in words or force, but in timing. He knew that silence could speak louder than outrage, and that patience could wound deeper than violence. So in the days that followed the diplomatic exchange, he showed no signs of hurt, no trace of offense. Instead, he appeared respectful toward Velra, calm and composed during every meeting, nodding to her points, asking thoughtful questions, offering agreements when it suited her pride. And all the while he watched and waited and learned. He began studying her habits, not in a way that would raise alarms, but in the way a strategist studies the battlefield. Velra had routines and preferences. She visited Earth's embassy garden each morning before sessions. She requested the same blend of spiced tea during breaks. She laughed at her own stories when she drank wine, and most importantly, she surrounded herself with those who praised her. She was proud, no doubt, and she was clever, but her arrogance created openings. Ryan started placing himself subtly in her orbit, not too close, not too eager, just enough to appear curious and diplomatic. He praised her speeches, complimented her on her skill in handling complex alliances, shared carefully crafted insights about human history, and even offered her access to Earth's rare diplomatic archives, which no other alien had been allowed to browse. It was not flattery, it was a mirror he held before her, one that showed her what she wanted to see. Velra began to take notice. She started seeking Ryan out during recesses, asking his opinions, requesting his presence at private briefings. She began to see him not as a threat, but as an unusual ally, a human who was different from the rest, not emotional, not loud, not easily offended. She didn't realize he had led her to this perception by design. The more she opened doors, the more she believed she was in control. One evening, after a long series of meetings, she invited Ryan to a private dinner in a high-rise chamber overlooking the ocean. It was the first time she made such a gesture to a human diplomat. The room was dimly lit, the sound of distant waves echoing against the transparent walls. Ryan dressed simply, spoke lightly, and listened more than he spoke. Velra poured herself another glass of wine, the same golden liquid from before, and for the first time, she shared stories from her youth, from her training, from the pressure of living under constant scrutiny by her own people. Ryan responded with stories of his own, never dramatic, never emotional, just small truths about humanity and how they learned to survive, by adapting, by waiting, by pretending to be weaker than they were until the right moment came. Velra laughed softly at this, admiring what she thought was humble honesty, unaware that each word was shaped to lower her guard. The air grew softer between them. That night the wine flowed, the conversation drifted, and when Velra leaned closer, there was no resistance from Ryan. It happened not with passion, but with precision, an encounter designed not for pleasure, but for purpose. When morning came, and Velra left the chamber, she felt no shame, only satisfaction. She believed she had conquered the most reserved of humans, that she had made him vulnerable without knowing she had given something away. Instead, what Velra did not know was that Ryan had ensured every step of that night was calculated, from the drink to the privacy to the genetic compatibility analysis his team had completed weeks before. And as he stood alone watching the sunrise, he was not thinking of her smile or her laughter or even the intimacy they shared. He was thinking of the message he was about to send, not with words, but with consequence. He had learned from history that some wars are fought with weapons, some with politics, and some with bloodlines. And this time, it would not be the humans who were shamed before the stars. It would be the one who thought herself untouchable. The journey back to her homeworld was smooth, the stars outside. Velra's vessel blurred into streams of light as the ship sailed through fold space. She sat in her private chamber, satisfied, confident. Even she believed she had accomplished what no other envoy had done before. She had brought the humans under control, reminded them of their place, and disarmed their representative without even raising her voice. In her mind, Earth was no longer a threat, only a planet humbled by her presence. But as the days passed, something inside her began to shift. It was subtle at first, a faint sensation of dizziness, a strange warmth in her skin, a small discomfort that refused to fade. She dismissed it at first, assuming it was fatigue or perhaps the side effect of Earth's atmosphere. But the symptoms persisted and grew stronger, and when the nausea began and her strength faltered, she finally agreed to undergo a full medical scan. Inside the sterile glow of the medical chamber, Velra lay still as the machines passed over her skin, glowing softly with energy. The healer assigned to her was silent for a long moment before the screen displayed a result that made Velra sit up in disbelief. Her body carried life, not illness. Her cells had joined with another's, forming something new, something impossible. A child. Velra froze. The air in the room felt thick. Her mind raced through logic, data, biology. Her species was not known to conceive easily, especially not with other species, and yet the scan was clear. The readings confirmed it again and again. And when she finally asked whose genetic code matched the human, Ryan's name blinked on the display without hesitation. She stood in silence, her hands clenched, her throat dry. No anger came, yet only disbelief. How could this happen? She had taken no risks, at least none she considered dangerous. It had been one night, a moment of control, not weakness, and now her entire existence had been altered by it. She summoned her aide, dismissed her duties, and locked herself in the chamber for hours, trying to understand what this meant, what it could do to her. When she contacted Ryan, her face was cold, her voice sharp, her fury barely contained. He appeared on the screen, calm as ever, seated in his office on Earth. The same soft lights behind him, the same neutral expression on his face, and when she demanded an explanation, he gave her one, not with regret, but with clarity. He told her this was no accident, that he had chosen the time, the place, the possibility, not out of passion but for a lesson, not out of desire but for consequence. He spoke without raising his voice, never once mocking her, but making it clear that every word, every gesture, every moment had been part of something bigger, something sharper than war. He said that she once stood before a room and humiliated an entire species with words, with posture, with policy, and that humans do not forget. Velra's face burned, her fists clenched, her jaw tightened. She wanted to strike the screen, tear the walls around her, but none of those things would change the truth. She was now bound to him, not by love, not by alliance, but by something far more complex and far more dangerous. Her career would not survive this. Her people would question her judgment. Her enemies would weaponize the scandal, and the humans would rise from this, not wounded but stronger, with proof of their cunning and reach. She tried to summon a defense, an argument, anything that could give her power again. But Ryan simply ended the call with one final line: now, we are equal. The screen faded, and Velra sat alone, surrounded by silence and shame, and something else she could not name, something growing inside her, something that would change more than just her body, something that might one day shake the entire structure of power she had once stood upon with such pride. The first crack did not come with a scream or an accusation. It came through silence. When Velra failed to appear at the monthly summit, her absence was noted by the Alliance Council. Her voice had once dominated the room, her words had shaped laws and guided treaties, and now that voice was gone, replaced by whispers. The other delegates wondered if she had fallen ill, or if her species was hiding something, and when questions were asked, no answers came, not officially at least. The galaxy was never kind to secrets long hidden before. Long fragments of the truth began to surface, not from Velra's own world, but from smaller planets that observed too closely, that heard too well, that sold their knowledge for influence. And as the rumor grew, it carried weight and speed, the tale of a powerful alien envoy returning from Earth pregnant, carrying the child of a human diplomat. It sounded like a joke at first, like the kind of story told in taverns between soldiers, but the more people heard it, the more they started to believe it, and once they believed it, they could not unhear it. Velra remained hidden from the public eye. She withdrew from her official duties and let her aides speak on her behalf, but it was not enough. Her opponents inside her own government saw blood in the water, and they struck with full force, questioning her leadership, her choices, her fitness to serve. Some of her allies remained silent, others turned their backs. She had built her career on strength, discipline, and control, and now all of that was stained with scandal. Meanwhile, on Earth, Ryan did not celebrate. He did not speak to the press. He did not reveal what he knew. He simply waited and watched as the balance of power began to shift. The very presence of Velra's pregnancy changed the way the Alliance saw humanity, no longer as emotional creatures who acted on impulse, but as beings capable of strategy at a level few had anticipated, and some began to rethink their alliances. A new treaty was drafted, this time led by humans, supported by smaller species who once feared Velra's influence. The terms were equal, fair, and more importantly, irreversible, and when presented to the council, none of Velra's people stood to challenge it. They had lost their voice, and the humans had gained theirs, not through war, not through invasion, but through potential. Velra received a copy of the new treaty in her private chamber. She read each word slowly, her fingers tracing the lines, her eyes hollow. She had tried to dominate them, had tried to humiliate them, and in doing so, she gave them the perfect reason to rise, and they did not rise with weapons, but with silence and shame and a child that now lived inside her, changing her future. With every breath in the quiet of the night, Velra looked at her reflection in the dark glass of her chamber, not as an envoy, not as a ruler, but as someone who had been outplayed, and not just outplayed, but understood in a way she did not think possible, by a species she once considered beneath her, and the weight of that knowledge pressed against her chest heavier than any law or punishment. Then she made a choice, one that no one saw coming. She sent a private message to Earth, a request not of anger, not of revenge, but of confrontation. She wanted to see Ryan again, not across a screen, not as enemies, not as diplomats, but face to face, without barriers, without scripts, without the weight of an audience. And Ryan agreed, not because he feared her, not because he wanted more power, but because he understood that some conversations could only happen in silence, behind closed doors, between those who had already seen the worst in each other and chosen to continue anyway. The shuttle landed in the far corner of Earth's diplomatic zone, a quiet place where reporters did not linger and cameras were forbidden. No flags, no crowds, no speeches, just wind moving through the tall trees and the soft hum of machines standing guard. The doors opened with a low hiss, and Velra stepped out, her eyes steady, her posture firm, though her body carried the silent weight of change. Inside her, she walked forward alone, unarmed, surrounded by shadows and silence, her arrival unannounced, her purpose clear. Ryan waited for her inside a simple room. Sunlight spilled through the wide windows, the air still and clean. He stood when she entered, offered no words, just a nod, not out of coldness, but respect. Velra sat across from him, their eyes met, and for a long moment neither spoke, and when the silence broke, it was not through anger or accusation, but a question. What do you want? Her voice held no venom, only tiredness, not weakness, but reflection. And Ryan did not look away. He answered with calm honesty. He wanted understanding. He wanted her to know that what he did was not out of hate, but necessity, that humans had been pushed too long, overlooked, too often treated like children in a room full of elders, and when they finally had the strength to stand, they chose to speak in a language that could not be ignored. Velra listened. She did not interrupt. She did not deny. She understood now how deep the insult had gone that night in the Great Hall. She had mocked a people who had fought through fire and time to earn their place, and in doing so, she gave them reason to respond in kind, and though it burned inside her, she admitted she had underestimated them. Ryan spoke again, his voice low this time, not as a representative of Earth, not as the architect of her downfall, but as a man who had carried a plan to the edge and now stood in the quiet aftermath. He said he did not want to ruin her. He did not want her people to suffer. He only wanted the galaxy to look at humanity without laughing, without doubt, without chains. Velra looked at him, her eyes no longer sharp with fury, but with something else, not forgiveness, but recognition. She saw in him the same cold fire that lived in her, the same refusal to bow to fate or weakness. She asked him what he planned to do with the child, and his answer came without hesitation. He would not use the child as a weapon. He would not claim it in public unless she allowed it, but he would protect it, raise it if she wished, or step back if she chose. He offered choice, something her own people had never given her. The words settled between them like dust in sunlight, and Velra felt something shift, not just in her thoughts, but in the weight she carried, not just the child, but the shame, the regret, the pride, and the strange realization that even across species, across betrayal and scandal, something new had been born, something neither of them planned, but both now had to face. Stood not to leave, but to offer her terms, not as a demand, not as a threat, but as a bridge. She would return to her world. She would rewrite her role, not through deception, but through truth. She would tell them she made a mistake, not in biology, but in judgment, and in return, she asked for peace, not silence, not separation, but shared responsibility. If this child was to exist between two worlds, then both must protect it, and both must grow. Ryan agreed, not with celebration, not with triumph, but with quiet acceptance, the kind that comes after a long battle. Not with guns, but with pride and pain they walked together to the edge of the room, looked out at the trees and the sky, and the place where all this began. When Velra left Earth that day, she was not the same, she was not defeated, she was changed. And when the galaxy learned of their agreement, the alliance did not fall, it reshaped, it stretched. It learned that power comes not only from strength, but from understanding. And as the stars turned above them, and the worlds moved on a new future, began one not written by war or arrogance, but by two voices, who once stood as enemies and now carried something greater than victory, something that neither of them expected, but both were ready to face the end.